In today's video, I'm going to show you 5 plantings that you should be making right now so that you can have your very best gardening year this year. Just to set the expectation, all of the plants I'm going to be talking about in this video are plants that you should be planting indoors, but I'm going to mention some plants that I plant indoors that most gardeners do not recommend planting indoors, so I'll definitely be mentioning some controversial topics, so stay tuned. Also, after each and every of these 5 categories of seeds that you should be starting right now, I'm going to present one bonus tip for starting seeds that could really revolutionize your seed starting this year, so you definitely don't want to miss that either. Alright, so the first crop that you really need to be planting like right now would be tomatoes. So it depends obviously on your climate, but you should be planting tomatoes about 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost date, which is about now for most of us, or you might already be late depending on where you live, especially if you're in the south or southeast. So definitely go ahead and get those planted, or at least look at your frost dates and plan on when you need to plant them, but most likely it's going to be right now. Also, speaking of tomatoes, if you are a tomato fan or just a fan of heirloom vegetables in general, this is definitely the right YouTube channel for you. You found the right one. I absolutely love heirloom plants, unique varieties, colorful plants, especially tomatoes. I'll have lots of videos this year on like my favorite unique vegetable varieties, heirloom tomato varieties, seed saving, like preserving heirloom seeds and how they can adapt to certain regions, different things like that. Lots of fun topics coming, so definitely if that sounds interesting to you, do subscribe, stick around, and you won't miss those. But moving on, I promised you that I would give you a bonus seed starting tip after each plant category. So here we go. Always preserve the humidity inside your seed flats when you're sprouting your seeds, and that could lead to germination rates that are as fast as double regular germination rates, especially if you're planting a variety that just germinates slowly in general anyways to begin with. So a great way to do this is humidity domes. A lot of seed flats actually come with humidity domes, which you just stick on the tray and you can take it off when the plants have sprouted, but it'll keep the humidity in there and literally, like I said, double your germination time. But what a lot of people don't tell you is that you can get the same effect without spending money on a humidity dome. All you have to do is take plastic saran wrap, which is probably sitting in your kitchen drawer right now, and you stretch it over your seed flats, and that does in effect the exact same thing. You just remove it when you see the green sprouts poking up. Alright, on to vegetable number 2, which you should be planting right now, and that is peppers. Bell peppers, jalapenos, chili peppers, you name it. Peppers, if you haven't already planted peppers, chances are, yeah, you need to do that now. You might even be late. Depending on where you live, obviously planting dates will differ a little bit, but in general, early March is definitely the late time to be planting these. It's recommended to plant about 8 to 10 weeks before your last frost. So I planted mine about 3 weeks ago. My last frost date's around April 15th or so. But if you do have a later frost date, then maybe now's the perfect time. If you live in a southern area, definitely go ahead and plant them though. Now's your time. You can take advantage of that long growing season and you should still get a great harvest in. Now, peppers are known for being finicky to sprout. So obviously definitely keep the humidity up like we mentioned earlier, but also I recommend using a heat mat. Peppers, more than any other plant that I've ever really germinated, really need a heat mat. They benefit from a heat mat. They can sprout way faster with a heat mat. Essentially the idea is that the mat is just keeping the soil temperature just up there high enough, 80, 85 degrees, that the plants will sprout a lot faster because it mimics that subtropical environment that they're native to. All you do is you set out your heat mat, you plug it in, and you set your flat with the pepper seeds right on the mat, and that heat mat will keep the temperature up there. They're really not too expensive. You can, go find one on Amazon, whatever. Shouldn't cost you more than 20 bucks. All right, and my bonus tip here is specific to peppers actually, and it is to use the Jiffy peat pellet trays. And I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that, but I started using them a couple years back and it really has revolutionized the way that I can grow my pepper seedlings. It really just makes it easier for me, and with the heat mat and humidity dome and everything, I feel like this is just a really simple and easy solution, and I have gotten really fast pepper germination times, like as little as 5 days, and I'll have my pepper plants sprouting, which is really impressive. They do a great job. Essentially the idea, if you haven't heard of them or seen them, is they're these little discs that are filled with some really high quality soil, like a seed starting mix. And so you pop it in water and they expand, and when they get about yay so tall or whatever, then you pop them in the tray, which has little circle discs in it that they fit right into. Each tray can hold quite a lot actually. And you plant your peppers in there, and it is a great way to start pepper seeds. I've been doing it for about 3 years now, and I'm not going back. You know, most of my plants, tomatoes, lettuce, whatever else, I just plant in regular seed flats, but I just feel like peppers are really finicky. If you've grown them before from seed, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. They take a long time to germinate, they grow slowly, and they're just finicky. You have to watch them a little closer than your other plants. So having the Jiffy pea pellet trays just really helps. All right, on to the next one. That is lettuce, number 3. Definitely now is about time to start. Depending on your frost date, maybe you should have already started it, maybe now's the perfect time. Whatever, it's a cool season crop, so lettuce is something that you can actually plant in the ground as many as, 3, 4, 2 weeks, whatever, 2, 3, 4 weeks before your last frost date. So you can actually get it in the ground a little earlier than like a tomato or pepper, like a month earlier potentially, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, yeah. It doesn't take that long to start indoors, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and you should have a lettuce plant that's already big enough to transplant outside. You don't have to use big peat pots or anything big for this plant. Just a seed tray, like a 72 cell seed tray with little tiny cells is perfect. You just want to start that plant and get it 4 or 6 weeks ahead of the ball game, and you could pop it out once it's root bound and put it in your garden. And this just helps me a lot. You can direct seed lettuce outside, but the problem for me is that lettuce seed is just so small and it gets washed away when it rains, or it gets washed under the soil and doesn't sprout because it needs light to germinate. Or the birds eat it, or just like scrape it away from the ground or whatever. So for me, I just like to start it indoors. It's not much of a hassle for me, but it just helps me a lot and makes sure that I have healthy lettuce plants that are ready to pop in the ground, and they're just a little ahead of the ball game, and that speeds up maturity and everything else. My bonus tip here now is that you don't actually have to use seed starting trays to plant your baby crops, especially for like tomatoes or whatever. You can actually plant them in pretty much anything that holds dirt. So I oftentimes use old cardboard egg cartons. In the past, I've also used milk jugs. I just cut off the top, punch a few holes in the bottom, and fill it up with dirt. I've used plastic water bottles that I cut in half. I've taken just regular like plastic disposable drinking cups, like the red kind or whatever. You could use paper drinking cups too, that are cardboard paper, whatever you call it. Anything like that. Those are all legitimate ways that you can easily start seeds. You don't have to spend money on specialized seed starting gear, especially if you're not growing a lot of plants. If you're just growing, 5 tomato plants, a couple pepper plants, 10 lettuce plants, then by all means, just find what you have around. You don't need to buy specialized equipment. But I would recommend once you start getting up there and you're planting a larger garden, if you're planting a lot of tomatoes or peppers or whatever, like I said, I really like having the actual seed starting trays, the Jiffy peat pellets or whatever. That streamlines the process when you have a lot of plants that need to cram into a little area, get them under your grow lights or whatever. But if you're not growing a lot of plants, just, use whatever you have in your house. That's great. That's exactly how I started. Saves money, and as long as there's good dirt in there, plants are healthy. Now, up next, we're gonna talk about other salad greens. This would be arugula, mustard greens, chard, kale, collards, like all that stuff, everything you can imagine, all these salad greens, leaves that you cook, all that type of stuff. Planted about now. For most leafy greens, like I just mentioned, they're pretty much all cool weather crops. So similar to lettuce, you'd go ahead and plant them right now, and in 4 to 6 weeks, or even as little as 3 weeks, like arugula or mustard greens, some of these faster growing ones, 3 weeks and it's ready to pop in the ground. So go ahead, plant those, and it won't take long. Once you get a sizable plant, you can pop it out and throw it in your garden. And even if it's still a little cold, they can tolerate frost, just nothing like no super cold freezes, nothing like 10 degrees, 15 degrees Fahrenheit, that's way too cold. But as long as it's staying above 25 or so, you should be fine. And my bonus tip here is to water your seed flats from below. Now this is a really good one, and it saved me not only a ton of time, but it's also really made my plants a lot healthier actually when I figured out this trick. So what I do is I'll take my seed flats, and instead of watering from above using a cup or a watering can or anything like that takes time and it gets the leaves all wet, which makes them more prone to disease and all that stuff. Instead, I'll take an under the bed container. I don't know if you've seen those, but basically the idea is just like a plastic container. It's pretty big. As long as it's big enough to hold your seed flats or your pea pots or whatever it is, Actually, for peat pots, what I'll do is I'll take 10 baking trays and I'll just line up my peat pots, as many as one will hold. But the idea is just that for the under the bed box, I would fill it up with water about, I don't know, 4 inches or so, and then I would put my seed flat in there and it would float, and then it would just pull in water from below until it had enough water and I could see that the top was moist. Then I pull it out and put it back on the shelf, and I just do that every time I need to water it. And then same idea with the peat pots, putting them in like a tin baking tray type thing, is I just see whenever that's out of water and they're getting dry, I just dump some water, a little bit of water in the tin baking tray, and it'll pull it up by the roots, and all the peat pots in that tray will get the water. I don't know if you've seen it, but recently there's been this idea circulating. A really great way to start seeds using the double cup method, which is essentially where you put 1 cup inside another cup. The bottom cup has a rock on it, a small like piece of gravel or something that just keeps the first cup about like an inch above, so that there's an air gap in there, and you put a little bit of water or hydroponic solution in there. That's another great way to do it, but for me it's just not practical on such a large scale. Now on to our last category that you should be starting right now inside. This one's gonna be really surprising to you actually. This is radish and beet. So I know, you guys are probably all thinking right now, like you've probably all heard that you should not start root crops indoors. Carrot, parsnip, radish, whatever, beet. You shouldn't be planting it indoors because what you probably heard is that it deforms the roots, so what you should do is actually direct sow in your garden. However, this is actually not really the case, or at least not in my experience. I've actually been planting my radish and beet for a while now indoors, and then I transplant them outdoors, and I have even better harvests than I've ever had before. For both radish and beets, you can plant about 3 weeks before you intend to transplant. They're really fast growers, so you can plant them, and then once they're 3 weeks old or so, you can put them in the garden. And from there, they go really fast. Radish, like 3 weeks indoors and they're big enough to transplant, and then it only takes another couple weeks and they're ready to harvest. Beets are similar, they take a little longer, but still they grow really fast. But getting them to start indoors really helps them, just that initial germination stage when they're most vulnerable. Having that done in a controlled environment really sets up the plant for success later down the road. And what I like to use is a method called multi-sowing. I'm actually going to link an article in the description of this video on multi-sowing so you can explore it a little more, but I'll explain the concept here. And it's essentially that in every seed cell you plant 4 or 5 seeds, and they all sprout, or maybe 4 sprout, and you have 4 seeds growing in one cell, and then you actually don't thin them down to 1 seed when you transplant. For crops like radish or beet, you keep all 4 and you plant it in the ground, and they'll grow in a clump. So you'll have 4 radish that are right next to each other. And originally I thought this was impossible because radishes are like bulbs, so you would think there can't be multiple ones in the same place. But they'll make room for each other and grow in a nice clump, and you get way more harvest from a smaller area. You do have to space clumps out a little more than individual plants, but still you get way more of a harvest for your square foot. So definitely I'd recommend go check out the article that I link on multi-sowing. It's really fascinating and it really does work. I've done it in my garden. It works wonders. Much bigger harvests, and I don't know, I thought it was impossible, but it's not. All right, so that concludes the 5 crops that you really need to be planting like right now, like yesterday. But with that, thank you so much for watching. Comment below if you have any questions or thoughts or any ideas for future video topics. I'm always open for any ideas that you have. And with that, I guess, happy gardening, and I'll see you on the next one.